Boa tarde, gente. Estou muito feliz de estar mediando essa mesa com duas mulheres e de estar participando desse evento, de fazer parte desse evento que o Trans-In-Corporados. Muita alegria. Obrigada, Sérgio, Lígia, Inês. E é importante dizer, já foi dito várias vezes aqui, mas esse evento é criado e produzido pela Universidade Federal do Rio de Janeiro, uma universidade pública. Viva a universidade pública, o ensino público, isso é muito importante enfatizar. Essa mesa de hoje tem o título de Somática, Hospitalidade e Micropolítica, 3 assuntos muito interessantes em si. O cruzamento deles, mais interessante ainda. Eu vou apresentar as duas palestrantes. A Meehan é irlandesa, pesquisa junto ao Centro de Pesquisa em Dança da Universidade de Coventry, no Reino Unido, na cidade de Coventry. Ela tem coleções editadas recentemente que incluem Dance Matters in Ireland, Contemporary Performance and Practice, com a UF McGrath, e Performing Process, Sharing Dance and Choreographic Practice, junto com Het Blades. Ambas as edições são de 2018. E ela é editora associada do Jornal de Dança e Práticas Somáticas, Journal of Dance and Somatic Practice. A Emma vai apresentar uma fala que tem o título de Somatic Practice and Cultural Embodiment, Somatic Principles for Hosting Dialogue Across Culture. Sim? E vou apresentar a Regina Miranda também, porque a gente pretende seguir uma fala da outra. A Regina Miranda é brasileira, é coreógrafa, autora e diretora teatral. Ela é diretora de Arte e Cultura do Laban Barternieff Institute, LIMS. É diretora fundadora do Centro Laban, Rio, iniciadora e diretora internacional da pós-graduação em Sistema Laban na Faculdade Angel Viana, em parceria com o Centro Laban. E é diretora artística e coreógrafa da companhia Regina Miranda e atores bailarinos. A Regina Miranda vai apresentar uma fala em inglês, apesar dela ser brasileira, mas ela está representando aqui o Laban Institute de Nova York, o LIMS, e por isso a fala dela acontecerá em inglês. O título da fala é Bartenieff Fundamentals in Social Somatics. Vocês têm 30 minutos e eu vou aqui tentar. You have 30 minutes, okay?
What I wanted to talk about today is somatic practices and culture, so the political aspects of culture and somatic practices. And maybe I shouldn't stand too close to that. Just to, hopefully I'll use this correctly now. Yes. So I just want to propose some questions for what I'll focus on today. So the first one is about how can somatic practices help us to understand how culture is embodied, and from that, how can we start to devise ethical approaches to cross-cultural exchange using somatic principles. But first, before I sort of delve into how I've explored these, I wanted to give a bit of information about my background and how I came to these questions. So I'm from Ireland originally, and my previous research was around... Am I doing okay? Okay. My previous research was all about site-based somatic dance in Ireland and looking at it in its cultural and political context. So some of the reasons that I discovered why somatic approaches were developing in the way they were in Ireland was because of its post-colonial history, having been colonised by Britain previously, so different attitude to the body responding to that, and also because of the sort of globalisation in more recent years. So a lot of the somatic artists I was looking at, they were wanting to make work in specific local sites with local communities, even though they were actually inviting in international artists. but it was quite important to them to really locate the body in local sites and responding to those situations. So when I was reading about the history of somatic practices, my story didn't fit in there. So the kind of general narrative that I found in somatic histories was this idea that somatic practices were starting to flourish in the 1960s, and they were responding to techniques such as ballet. So that didn't fit with where I came from, because somatic practices only really started to develop in Ireland in more recent years because of the political situation. And also, we don't have a conservatoire training in Ireland, so that technical, we weren't necessarily responding to that technical training. So there were other reasons somatics were developing. These are some images of the site-based work I was examining. So then, more recently, I moved from Ireland to the UK for work. And I discovered some new aspects around how culture is embodied. And there'll be some images throughout of different performances and projects I've been involved in. I was quite surprised. I wasn't expecting there to be much change moving from Ireland to the UK. But in fact, I felt quite disorientated when I moved countries. So I became aware of sort of cultural habits that I carried with me and expectations of response from other people, and these were not necessarily met. So I found it quite disorientating. So some of these habits were things around like how people use touch, how they use voice and sense of proportion in public and private space. How people use interpersonal dynamics and ways of relating. So I continued with my personal somatic practice to reorientate myself, but also to sort of become aware of these cultural histories that I carried with me that I wasn't entirely aware of before that, and also just to kind of explore how I might respond and inhabit in this new environment. I wondered about whether to give examples, but I'm going to hold back from that now, because there could be the fear of maybe essentializing or stereotyping Irish or English behavior. But really what I'm trying to say is that, you know, on moving, I just became really aware that there were things I carried with me that I embodied, and this was sort of disrupted when I moved to another culture. So yeah, there's a set of social codes of behaviour that I found in the different environments. So while I was experiencing this, I started to look around the literature and examples of practice to really understand if there's much written about experiences of migration and how this is explored in somatic practice. But I couldn't really find very much. And also, I really couldn't find very much about the bodily experience of migrants in Irish diaspora studies. So I thought this is really an area that somatic practices could contribute to. But I just also want to say, obviously I was moving under particular conditions. You know, I had previous access to travel and education. I was moving for work. And they're not the conditions under which, you know, many other refugees or asylum seekers are moving country. So there's a whole other set of considerations there. But it did bring to my attention what it's like to move, to be an outsider, and how it can be unsettling, and what maybe somatic practices could offer to that. I think this is also quite pertinent at this moment in time to explore. As you're probably aware, Britain is now attempting to leave the European Union. So there's all these considerations around what is national and what are national borders, who belongs and who doesn't belong, sort of negative attitudes towards immigrants. And this is happening supposedly in a period of like globalization where we're supposed to be more connected, more fluid, in more dialogue. So I thought this was an important moment for somatic practices really to explore this area. So I'm going to kind of have two sections. One is around sort of reviewing research on somatic practices and culture that's informed my work. And then the following section is more examples of practice where I've made some proposals about what we might do. Okay. So I was going to start with an article from 2002 by Martha Eddy. And she talks about the profound influence of Eastern and African movement concepts and practices on somatic practices. And she suggests these global influences are not really acknowledged enough in the field. And she talks about this sense of a monolithic view of somatic history, or that it's monocultural, when in fact it's more hybrid. And she also addresses how perception is different across cultures. So the example she gives is, asking students where the mind, what the mind is, where it resides, and this can be different in different cultures. And I come up with other examples of things that might be different later. So she proposes this question: how can we facilitate somatic practices and philosophy with intercultural sensitivity, whether that's acknowledging histories or how we practice today? And then, as it happens, in the same year, Sylvie Fortin wrote an article on transcultural perspectives, so looking at how somatic practices is practiced in different cultures around the world. And she raises the issue of how, the standardizing and certification of practices internationally. So starting from the idea that we have something shared, we share cells, so there's some biological similarity. But of course, the problem with that is this idea of creating a sort of a neutral or a standard body. And in fact, we need to actually look at diversity in somatic practices. And I think she's quite hopeful in this article. She says we're moving to a more eclectic and sense of diverse exchanges. There's different pathways into somatics. There's more cross-fertilization. And she makes this statement here. We move from being ego-somatic, centered on individuals, to a philosophy of ecosomatics, promoting relationships between knowledge bases and people in different sociocultural contexts. I feel this is actually still something we need to do. Both of these articles are over 15 years old, but they raise kind of continuingly pertinent questions. So more recently, in 2014, Sylvie Fortin again and Andre Grau are still debating this question, are trying to balance out the idea that bodies are culturally, socially, and politically mediated, but somehow we need to have shared understandings across cultures to create some kind of cross-cultural dialogue. And this idea of dialogue is something that I return to in the examples of practice in what I'm trying to explore. Then, just last year, there was a conference and a special issue which was exploring really how somatic practices can engage with social issues. So this, they call it bodily undoing. So it's the idea of how you can undo habits that might be individual, but how can you undo habits that are actually socially or culturally or politically created. So in this special issue, they highlight the eugenic and racist dimensions of historical precedents to somatic practices and how that needs to be explored more. The whiteness of the current field in somatic practices, and they state there's a need to counter elitism a move towards inclusion and accessibility to develop a somatics for social change. And I think they ask a very good question. How do we question relevance, access, inclusion, and modes of knowledge production within our own work? So this topic of access and inclusion is quite an important one to consider. So outside of the universities, I suppose the way most people can access somatic practices is through private paid-for individual sessions or group workshops or certifications. And Isabel Ginot is looking at how we can bring somatic practices to people who experience social inclusion. So she's looking at in particular migrant communities and also people living with chronic health problems. And she talks about the financial barriers to people accessing it, but also not really knowing what somatics is, and then she was also talking about how to explain somatics to the gatekeepers, so people like social workers, healthcare workers. And she found, a huge barrier there where the language used in somatics wasn't really communicating and wasn't therefore, the gatekeepers were not allowing them in. So I think it's something we really need to think about is how we speak about somatic practices to communicate with other audiences and to make it relevant. So finally, in this sort of review, I wanted to mention the work of Ciani Fernandez. And again, she's talking about ideas of access and inclusion. And she talks again about the certifications which largely take place in the US and Europe. And this has problems, obviously, in terms of accessibility because of travel and the finances required. She also raises the critique at somatics, which has been going round. She says somatics is criticised for being a grouping of mostly North American and European techniques, which constitute modes of body training according to cultural preferences. However, she, in fact, counters this argument by referring back again to the global influences on somatics, saying that they're hybrid forms. And she suggests that somatics can, in fact, be decolonizing. So it's not domesticating the body in search of an ideal form, but rather stimulating the development of relational and adaptive abilities through creative interaction with the environment. So this makes me also reflect that, we're not just embodying cultural heritage that we carry with us or techniques we absorb along the way, but in fact, through somatics, we can find a way to negotiate and move around them. So it's not that just the things that we take in or learn in our culture or politically, that's it, that there's the capacity to transform that. And in fact, somatic approaches could be a way in to do that. I suppose I also just want to mention that, in this review, I became really aware that many of the authors that I referred to, many of them are based in North America and Europe. So again, that's sort of reinforcing the problem. I don't have time, unfortunately, today to really deal in detail with that issue, but it's something maybe we can come back to in the questions around, the circulation and visibility of research from other areas and issues around translation and so on. And I'd be happy to sort of collect reference points from other cultures and share them during the conference. So maybe we can come back to that. So just to recap over the ideas that I've been folding into my practice is this idea around intercultural sensitivity, the eco-somatics of exchange across knowledge bases, the idea that the body is culturally mediated, but also a need for shared dialogue, and also to tackle the issues of relevance, access, and inclusion. So I'm going to move into the examples from practice now. And I thought I might do that with a very, very short experiential exercise for like 2 minutes or something. And this will sort of maybe share a little taster of some of the scores I've been developing. So it's very short. So I just invite you, where you're sitting, to bring your attention close to the body, your body. So that could be just bringing the gaze in, or it might be closing your eyes. And I'm just going to ask you to receive the condition you're in right now. So any body signals from your body systems, whether it's your heartbeat or your breathing, muscles and bones, the fluids in the body, the organs, checking in what the nervous system's doing. Are there any tensions or fatigues, pulsations, joys? And then to move more in a very quick manner to a sense of the wider environment. So trying to bring with you the sense of your condition and attending to the wider environment. So this might be through opening your eyes, seeing into mid space or far space or distant space. It might be through your sense of touch with the environment, sounds or smells, maybe atmospheres in the space and rhythms. Anything that's familiar or unfamiliar. And really noticing your position in this environment. And then the final little step is, I invite you to make any adjustment you need to make, taking into account your condition and your relation with this environment. So whether it's shaking or patting or moving in your seat or anything that needs to be adjusted. Yes. Coughing is good. Breathing and yawning. Waving. And just finding yourself into a position from which you can continue to be here in this space. So that's a very little small taste of some explorations I've been doing, looking at the interoception, the extraception, and also the boundaries between when exploring how my culture is embodied and how I adapt to new environments. I just want to mention briefly, sort of going back to moving country, what somatic practices offered me, what supports. So when I moved country, I was in a constant sense of adjusting to newness. So new routes to work, new things to do, new people. So I found myself in quite a sense of sensory overload. And I found starting with the step of interoception really helpful. And then from there, being able to develop a sense of my spatial locatedness. So moving from disorientation to sort of interoception and reorientating. So it might be, for example, looking at weight and position and so on. To attend to shifts and changes as well. So if I went to interact with someone in a way during the day and my expectations were not met, sometimes I was left with sort of holding, freeze or things like that, and I could work through that. It helped me to attend to sort of what I valued from my cultural history, what I carried with me, some things that I felt, actually I want to bring this with me and I want to play this out in my new environment and see what happens. It also allowed me to look at the unfamiliar and test it out and try it out, so to expand my sense of cultural embodiment. So now kind of developing a more fluid sense. So this, I suppose, was quite a personal exploration, and I was then considering how I might bring this into a more public encounter. So I decided what I wanted to do was not necessarily to facilitate somatic workshops, because potentially that would only include certain people. What I wanted to do was create sort of social encounters, small events that started from sharing my cultural heritage to open up dialogue with other people about how they perceived culture, how they embodied culture, what were their experiences of moving country. So I'm going to very briefly show some examples of that. So yeah, this was the question I was left with. So how to work with somatic principles to explore cultural embodiment and dialogue across cultures beyond my own experience. So I'm sort of going to jump through this because there isn't much time. But there was a project called the Shrine to Women's Work, where there were 11 artists invited to submit something around their female lineage. So I did a submission around my great-grandmother's lace. So it was dealing with political scenarios of gender roles, but I don't really have time to go into that. But what's important in this situation, I realised in an exhibition context that my body is not always with the exhibit. And for me, this was a problem because it was supposed to be interactive, and I wanted to engage with what were people experiencing. So I did get the opportunity to test out a few times with people to look at how I might start to dialogue with them around, this is my cultural experience, this is my cultural history, this is what happened to me when I moved culture, what's your experience? And start to dialogue around how culture is embodied together. What was interesting was I started to understand that I had to draw on the somatic principles to start this dialogue. And I'll go into a bit more detail about the steps I took to do that. But in this instance, for example, someone started to talk to me about how they expressed their sexuality different in different cultures. So this was surprising. It wasn't a point where I started, but it was really interesting to hear their perspective on that. Someone else talked to me about, they appeared like they were from England, but actually their parents had taken journeys, and they talked about these migrant journeys. So I was really curious to try and explore further, what is this thing of hosting dialogue, and how am I using somatic practices to explore that? So in this project, it's called Invisible Irish, and it was about the Irish community in Coventry, where I live. So what have I time to say about that? I didn't think this community would be open to doing somatic workshops with me. So what we decided to do was do cook-along interviews. So in that way, collect sensory data and start conversations together about their experiences of moving country. And then we were invited by the Coventry Refugee and Migrant Centre to share something from the project. So this event is sort of a sharing of world cultures. So we created some interactive events. So we created food to share. 5 minutes, okay. We shared recipes. We asked people to leave us recipes. We tried to talk to people about their experiences. We had art-making activities. So just something I took away from that was quite a different environment from an exhibition space. It really made me reflect on who feels entitled to interact and what a privileged position that is, and how I might use the somatic practices to embody a sense of welcome. Because a lot of the people there were not people who are welcomed on a daily basis, and especially, you know, in this situation in the UK now, there's very negative perceptions of immigrant communities. So just to put that aside and maybe outline some of the things I'm trying to do in this hosting dialogue. So what is hosting? It's this idea of receiving guests, welcoming, a sense of hospitality, a sort of a moderator or overseer role. And I was curious how I might host a dialogue with those visiting these events. And I used a somatic approach, not facilitating a workshop, but trying to put it in events that might be accessible to different kinds of people. So I used the witnessing approach from authentic movement, so attending to my own sensations, thoughts and feelings while in the presence of others, attempting to have a non-judgmental perspective, containing and holding the environment, feeding back and reflecting on formed thoughts people were starting to explore. I borrowed also from a Murta movement practice, which comes from an Indonesian dance artist called Prapto, and his work is very much in environment. So looking at elements such as in myself and the other people at these events, what position do people take up, what proportion, so whether that's through voice or use of space, what niches they feel comfortable in, and things like that. I also developed a lot of scores before I would go into environments to develop my awareness, and had to make a lot of choices about how to move in and out of proximity with different kinds of groups, testing how much or how little to say, so containing, prompting questions, responding, sensing the atmosphere, eye contact, boundaries, posture and gesture. And so it felt at times like we were creating some kind of mutual somatic choreography where we were learning from each other, sometimes through language and sometimes not. So this is kind of a really developing area for me, so I would be really curious to share this through practice with people and see what other contexts they might use this in. So just to conclude, so what I've been trying to look at today is addressing the history around culture and somatic practices, looking at how somatic practices might support cultural embodiment, and aiding us to sort of respond to new environments, and to open up this area around somatic practices and migration, and also maybe to propose the political relevance of hosting dialogues across cultures. So for me, hosting serves to expand the remit of somatics. It could also offer access and inclusion to different communities. And it could be a set of skills developed from somatics for a wider political end. And I'd be curious to see how others might use hosting skills, or maybe they're already using hosting skills in their own work. So I just wanted to end to reiterate some questions maybe we can share further. What communities have been excluded from somatic research? What can somatics offer to explore cultural embodiment? And how can we generate exchanges that support cross-cultural dialogue in ethical ways? So just finally, I should share the credits, so that the people who actually took pictures of different events, some of my own and other people's, and there's my own contact details. Thank you.
Só para explicar que eu estou como aqui hoje como diretora do Laban BARTENIEFF Institute. E aí o pessoal nos Estados Unidos pediu, como está sendo live streamed, pediu que a fala fosse então em inglês. Mas depois, na parte das perguntas, aí eu acho que tudo bem. Aí eu deixo e volto para o português, certo? Normalmente eu falo de improviso, mas em meia hora é realmente impossível. Então, eu queria realmente começar por congratulate the organization of this beautiful event. It's really great. I wish I could be here more, but I could read everyone that you brought in and all the people that are here. It's great. It's the second, and right? It's the second or the third? It's the second. So things that continue and get better are very, very much welcome. And I would like to thank the organizers, particularly Professor Lígia Tourinho, who directly invited me to be here, to share my experience with Irmgard Bartenieff and discuss her contribution to the somatic field through the Bartenieff fundamentals. Okay, so I would like to briefly pause to reflect on what somatic means. And it means different things for different people in different groups. It doesn't have a one definition, which I think it's great. But the word derives from the ancient Greek soma, used to describe the whole person. It is interesting to note that the term was always intended by pioneers, such as Irmgard Bartenieff, to be applied specifically to social change. I find that interesting because that's how it started for her. That's not how it developed. And so to me, it has been, who have been there from basically almost from the beginning, to see, how this have been changing over time and how it's turning around again. In the US, when I first started looking into social somatics, it seemed like a natural development born from somatic practitioners' desire to co-create alternative paths and possibilities of collaborating among different communities, which otherwise would stand disconnected and often in conflict. Nowadays, social somatics takes many forms as diverse somatic practices address inequalities, counteract injustice across domains, and build communities. I think that more generally, we could describe it as a practice of trying to shape a world nurtured by positive human values. So in the mid-'70s, I left a successful career as a ballet dancer, dancing in New York with the Joffrey Ballet, to study the movement theories of Rudolf Laban, which attracted me first because I was using a music language to choreograph. And suddenly someone told me, well, there is a movement language. And I said, so I need to know that since I want to choreograph. And from my very first step, and that's something that I can talk another time because it's big, I was guided by Irmgard Bartenieff, who was the person who actually received me at the Dance Notation Bureau. She was a colleague of Laban, first a student, then a colleague of Laban, and one of the pioneers of dance therapy and social somatics. At the time, we're talking mid-'70s, her work spanned from dance and physical therapy to anthropology and cultural studies. In her fluency in connecting the individual and social bodies showed me the possibility of being a dancer and have a life beyond dance studios and as a cultural activist. that was a revelation for me, because I really passed my day in studios and loving it. But I longed for more connections with other spheres, with people who were not from the Laban world or from the dance world. So she showed me that possibility. She showed me that it was possible, and actually it would enrich my movement research. So I am eternally grateful for my study with her, and from that moment in life where I was allowed to be more than a dancer. And a dancer at that time, some of you here, but very little, very few know that. Dance at the time was like that. Dancers don't think. Dancers dance. This was the ethics, okay? So it was really fabulous to be able to think and talk and ask questions and saying, I don't understand. I don't get it. So with her and with my mentor, Virginia Reed, first as a student and later as Irmgard assistant, I initiated an open-ended pilgrimage that never ceases to challenge me, to change courses and visit new neighborhoods and territories. At that time, Irmgard Barternieff was distinguishing her work, and I think this is important right now, from Laban's work. Because Laban has this enormous theoretical body of work on movement. In his system, later called Laban's system, there is a category that's called BAS, body, effort, shape, and space. And they are interrelated all the time, although didactically we do emphasize one or another. So she was working on the body category, maintaining the connection with Laban, but distinguishing her work in her own female voice. Interesting. So I was there. I was lucky to be there. So this discussion happened with her in her home, and seeing all the other references that, she gathered by herself and not with Laban. So immediately I learned something that was helpful for my whole life, which is you can have your own voice and still be connected and still feel proud of your association, but you can have your own voice. So that was the time. So I am one of the few that says Laban and Barternieff. Most people say Laban Barternieff. And it's sort of like the official title, the institute that she founded is the Laban Barternieff Institute of Movement Studies. Well, guess what? It was not her title. It was given, but she didn't like it very much. But her singular voice for the past 40 years, since I graduated as a movement analyst, Laban's foundational theories and all the works that have been actualizing the foundational work of both Laban and Barternieff, they continue to excite me. They excite my imagination. They make me wonder, have more questions. And I think questions have been also nurturing people's imagination. So today I will focus on Barternieff and not on Laban. And in presenting the Barternieff fundamentals, I am not privileging one particular narrative over many others that I cherish and respect, but I am just sharing my experience, my life, and my dedication within this field. These resources have been rich enough to nurture multiple practices, and I will tell you some in many lives. So over these 40 years, I have been seeing with pleasure the proliferation of somatic approaches. Some have developed from the Bartenieff source, as Martha Eddy, that was already that Emma brought. And Martha Eddy has many works. She has body, mind, dance, moving for life. She had a book that she, in 2016, Mindful Movement. Then there's Peggy Hackney with integrated movement. Bonnie Cohen's Body Mind Centering, who was a student and who was just last month in our conference at the Laban Institute, honoring Irmgard and the legacy that Irmgard left and that she belongs. In my own body space connection that honored both Laban and Bartenieff, but it's also my own voice. And I think that this distinguishing voices while maintaining connection is one of the things that we're going to talk about. So unlike the common belief and practice of the Bartenieff as a set of tremendously internalized exercise quietly performed on the floor, let me tell you a secret. Irmgard Bartenieff, the most important thing for her was to change levels. That was top. Why did she ask people to come to the floor? Let's do a quick experiment. Go to the floor, if you can. Now, go quickly. Now, look at the time that it takes to go to the floor, okay? No need for everybody to go. The ones that are not going, now try to observe the get back to place. Okay, all right, I can move. You see, try not to use too many supports. So look at that. You see how many supports you're using? So that's why she went to the floor. Because to make it easy to move across different social levels, to make it more easy to be up, because when we are up, we also like hanging to things and holding to things. So it was really important for her to bring the three levels, but also to acquire some quietness, to be able to have kinetic awareness. So, but the main reason was the one that I just told you. And here I have a quote from Irmgard. The main object of all my material is to suggest additional modes of perceiving yourself and the world around you, using your live body totally, body-mind feeling as a key to that perception. So I decided to, instead of becoming too theoretical, including because this is not a Laban audience, so it was very good and a challenge for me. I have been speaking mostly for Laban audiences. I decided to really share the way that I have been using. And the way that I have been using has been teaching, of course, but where I think that I am more successful in changing levels and dialoguing with people is through site-specific performances. So here's Júlio Rocha and Jardel Filho, people at the choreographic atelier, some here were part of it, and Clara, I don't remember her family name. So I don't make a differentiation between educational projects and artistic projects, because all my educational projects are artistic, and vice versa. So, but this I would like to highlight, because it's maybe a project that I am most, in terms of social somatics, is the one that I am most proud of, because it involved 100 people every year from all social classes, all ages, and all different backgrounds. It was a totally new experience for the students and for the professors. Everybody was like, can I give a class to 100 people? No, that's impossible. That's not going to happen. And, you know, to really deal on an everyday basis with the differences and with the cultural differences within the same city, because you don't need to be in different countries. You go to different neighborhoods and you already have cultural differences. It was fabulous. It was such a learning experience for everyone involved. And this was, the name of this performance was Central do Brasil, which is the main train station of Rio de Janeiro. So they researched, here you have 3 people, but there were 30 or 40, I can't remember how many there were. So they were users of these trains. They informed us. So it was always, I would bring an idea, dialogue with them, and the creation really of the work was shared with everyone. I think that the choreographic atelier also branched out from an understanding of pedagogy as a deeply civic, political, and moral practice. That is, pedagogy as a practice for freedom, as proposed by the Brazilian Paulo Freire. We should have the best education in the world. One of the most important educators of the 20th century, Brazilian, was here all the time, right? We need to pay attention to that. I think that that was my turning point, and I wanted to speak about that. I will never be linear. When Irmgard said, be ready to change, change is here to stay. And when suddenly I read Charles Darwin's complete phrase, because I had read only, it's not the strongest of the species that survived. And then it is the strongest of the species that survives. This phrase came in so many variations, but I had never read it completely. And, but it is the one most capable to change. So change levels, change perspectives, change dynamics, change your body and your self. You know, the idea of self and of being is less important for Barternieff in the Barternieff fundamentals than becoming. So I developed, methodology when I decided that I was going to use BF in social somatics. And I denominated them the 3 A's. And they represent a combination of capacities that are agility, capacity to respond quickly to challenges, adaptability, capacity to connect, preserving one's own identity, and alignment, capacity to define or understand spatial intention. They are kind of tactics in the sense of that Desserteau talks about tactics. He makes a difference between strategy that's more linked to institutions and territory. You have a strategy to maintain a territory, and tactics, which is more open-ended, and that seizes the occasion, plays with the unattended, with the unexpected. So, to bridge these connections, these are the symbols of the Bartenieff fundamentals. So it is my personal playground. It looks, parece festa junina, né? This has to be in Portuguese. I don't know how to translate that. But anyway, breath, it's like that. It's right there in the place of be. Bridging as the foundation of all movement. Core distal, the top one, is a first step in differentiation. It's the third time that I use this word. What are your core beliefs? How these beliefs impregnate your actions and irradiate to the world around us and beyond. What are the relationships that feed and are fed by your core beliefs? That goes up there. Head, tail. It always reminds me of Alice in Wonderland. Oh God, my feet, they are so far from me, right? Here the questions for me are, do you know how to preserve your personal integrity, stand for your beliefs, while connecting with the changes in the environment? Is there an alignment between your core values and how you do what you do? In the product of what you do, your performance, your class, your relationship somehow embodies your beliefs, or when it gets like to the end line, it becomes dissociated. Then I love the other one, which is in the disconnections. Upper, lower. Is this conversation between support and outreach. And in the Bartenieff, not necessarily the support is your lower unit, and your reach is your upper unit. But I bet money that if I say, reach out for me, nobody's going to do that. Right? We're going to do this. So we overemphasize our upper unit and sort of forget the lower unit, including because we are sitting and nobody sees, and sometimes there is even a table. So it's very important when I can reach around and still connect to my microphone. And when I find support with my upper. So these are tactics. And then there's the body half. And then I'm staying with this because these are, I think that they can be easily grasped, and they are so important. Here is body half, you know, I think that, but, I also would like this. Well, part of me thinks that I should do that way, but another part of me thinks otherwise. How do I do that? And when it's not with you, and when you are part of a duo, for example, and you think one way and the other part thinks differently, how do you deal with that? And when you go to the group, how about if one group thinks in one way and another group thinks differently? Are you able to work your body half, or you have to kill the other half? So I think that body half is politically very important. And finally, cross-lateral, which are the diagonal pathways, the rotation, the possibility of saying, and if you add with changing levels, it's the last one, all the way down. And you say, well, well, if I come this way, or if I look at other perspectives, and if I could go around and come back from another perspective, I would see it differently, right? So to use this core, these are the organization of the Bartenieff, and take that to our lives, I think that already makes a big difference. So with that in mind, I will now go fast. And this was a work that we did in 2002, where we established creative dialogue with people who lived across the street from our studio and lived in tenement houses, which are forbidden in Rio. So their tactics for living was to be invisible. How to work with them without endangering their survival skills. But at the same time, were they happy with their survival skills that would be invisible for everyone? So we worked 1 year on that. Here's Adriana, who did a lot of interviews, and Adriana Bonfatti, who is right here, and Marina, who's right here, who works, they both work in the company, were part of this work. That was incredible. And our premiere was, they became part of the work as well, and we did a premiere for them. And I think it was maybe the better premiere of my life. So these are some of the tactics. Read quickly. And this, that is there. That's not a problem. Take a photo. And about changing levels. This is another work. Sylvia was part of this work as well, and I had to choose. Sylvia, who is here, is collective body. And how could we change levels? How could we connect in the way that the other person lives and not be judgmental, and at the same time bring our own voice? It was very interesting, right, Sylvia? It was a wonderful experience in the streets of Copacabana. We didn't take people's professions or social class or no social class at face value. We were talking to the guards and to homeless and to young and old and whatever. This diversity that Copacabana has, which I find fabulous. We are co-witnessing undesirable social patterns. But sometimes we forget that we have the power to transform the situation. One of the things of social disease is that it makes you believe that you have no force to change. And then you can only react. You can only be indignant, but you cannot do. That's expected. That is expected. Another place is the place of vengeance. Well, I was under, now I'm going to be up. Remember the upper lower? So it's like you repeat the same pattern, you just change who is where, we need to be attentive, otherwise we repeat the same models with different people and seemingly different ideas. So here's a recent and very interesting work that many people that are here also participated. I decided to go into fashion. Fashion is the most discriminative place. You have to have a certain body. A collection, it's something very important. It has to have a meaning. One. It's all about the one body, one collection, one message. So here, I worked with a collection of several collections of Ronaldo Fraga, mixing all of them, non-gender specific, in a group of 30 people of all ages. All of them, I was working with with the concept of crowd, which I love, instead of the concept of people, because people sort of flirts with the one. We're going to have a consensus, and all of us will be together and be the people of, or the party of, and the crowd is wild. It was a nightmare for the photographers. They didn't know where to look. And I loved it. We don't have great pictures of the group because they were totally puzzled, because every single person that was in this performance had an individual voice. And at the same time, they were all connected. And we are still connected. The group remains and connects every day almost, right? Ligia was part of it. So this is Mama Horn, who is very complex. His official name is Lucas Valentim. His adopted name is Mama Horn. He answers to both. He is both man and woman. His gender choice is self-defined as plural. It's beautiful to deal with that and to spread that with the whole group. It was to everyone experiencing to have different gender definitions from the one that had been adopted sort of unconsciously. It was great. That's a continuation of the research in, with homeless, this time in San Francisco. And the most important thing with the homeless women was adaptability. It's really unbelievable. I will try, I have it here. One declaration. I used to be someone, but now I hide in my weight, and I don't smile anymore. I also hide agreeing with people. I agree with anything better that way. And guess what? It may happen to everyone. That was a big refrain. So what can we do to in each of our work? We work with people, right? So we work in somatic practices. It doesn't need to be the somatic practice. It can be your somatic practice. So here, for me, it's my most extensive research. That I published in a book in 2008, already 10 years, Body-Space Connections. And an example of body becoming that many people here know and who is here present. She really acquired this topological body that feels whole when it's changing. It doesn't go to the whole as a stable whole, but flourishes in the changing. It's the same, by the way. It looks like a Francis Bacon, right? This is the same performance that, and I'm getting to the end, Venus Extravaganza, in honoring a person who was killed because of her sexual orientation. This was in Casa França Brasil in March of 2018. In here is the multiple centers. Who is part of the performance? Who is more important here? So I think that the multiple centers and the same value is here well demonstrated. And one thing that I saw and that I see in my practice is that when you connect affections, love, heart, beats. And something very beautiful happens. And that, to me, is really the most human value. It's to be able to be human, right? So thank you very much. Obrigada.
Primeiro, obrigado pelas... Emma? Okay, it's okay? Okay. Obrigado pelas falas. Eu queria fazer uma provocação, pensando nesse espaço que a gente está, que é a região portuária, no Museu de Arte do Rio, que é uma região que passou por um processo de extrema mudança forçada e de adaptação forçada. E eu fiquei pensando sobre, até por conta dessa aproximação entre que a Regina fez entre Barternieff e Darwin, sobre a ideia de adaptabilidade, de ser adaptável e de como uma potência a adaptabilidade. E como a gente pode pensar em casos onde a adaptabilidade se transforma num instrumento de construir invisibilidades ou mesmo de exclusões, extermínio, genocídio, né, a ideia de você tem que se adaptar é uma ideia muito própria do universo do marketing e e do processo neoliberal que vivemos. Então, como pensar a noção de adaptabilidade dentro de um contexto neoliberal em que ser adaptável está relacionado a...
O problema é que a palavra... em português. O problema é que a palavra adaptável é mentira nesse caso. Está se falando de assimilação. E com o disguise, né? Como chama? Agora fica tudo misturado, o disfarce da palavra que é mais palatável. Então, vamos adaptar. Adaptar é uma coisa gradual, né? Você precisa de argumentos, precisa de desejo dos dois lados, precisa de diálogo. E quando isso não acontece, o que está acontecendo, na verdade, é faça como eu. Né? E assimile, assim você será aceito, se você ficar dessa maneira. E isso, de certa maneira, eu venho acompanhando bastante. Eu fiz 6 espetáculos na zona portuária, então, em 2014. E isso era uma coisa que as pessoas sentiam, mas, ao mesmo tempo, ainda não haviam grupos, mas não havia uma organização que criasse uma massa crítica, que pudesse... faltava a multidão. A multidão para ter uma força variada, acabava ficando... Quando haviam as negociações, eu participei só vendo de algumas, as ciladas eram muitas. E quando você tem muitos argumentos de um lado e apenas um do outro, fica difícil. Acaba acontecendo a assimilação. Mas não acontece só aqui. Acontece em muitas cidades, né? É uma coisa que está acontecendo mundialmente, né? Cada vez as pessoas e as cidades têm que ficar mais iguais umas às outras. Porque é o que vende. Então, isso não é adaptabilidade.
Emma, você falou rapidamente sobre a experiência da relação entre culturas e você mencionou o Prapto, que é uma pessoa que você vem acompanhando em práticas somáticas, que vem fora desse mainstream da somática, que vem ele é asiático, eu não lembro se ele é japonês. Se você pudesse falar um pouco mais dessa experiência com ele, da relação com o ambiente que você mencionou rapidamente, como que isso acontece na relação que você estabeleceu com ele.
Okay, I'll try and answer. Oh, I don't need that now. So, yeah, Prapto is an Indonesian dance artist. He travels a lot. In fact, he has quite a big following. So he comes to Europe every year, and there's a lot of people engaged in his work. But I'm not sure actually if he's got to North America or South America. But yeah, and actually he's quite interesting because the context in which he works in Indonesia is very diverse already. So already in that environment he's in, he's working across ethnic backgrounds and religious backgrounds. But funny enough, my experience of Prapto's work was first through an English woman. So I'm sort of receiving these cultural influences mediated in different ways. So again, it's that diversity of somatics. And she lived in Indonesia and studied with them, as did actually a large group of English people went there and lived for a period of time and then moved back and spread the work and then invited him over and hosted him here. So I worked first with her and then he came over and I worked with him as well. But I don't know if that answers your question.
Yeah, no, because people don't know him here, so it's nice to talk more about his work.
Yeah, his work is it's quite esoteric. He doesn't quite have a system, and he came to Coventry last year or the previous year at the Dance and Somatic Practices Conference, and he gave a workshop in waves because so many people came. He could only take so many people at a time, but he said very little, but he sort of drops in some words, and a lot of it again is sort of embodied in himself being in the room and how he moves with people. But his work is very much about relationship with the environment. From what I understand of the cultural situation there, he's always moving first from community, first from environment, not first from individual. So I don't know, but I'd have to go on for a long time if I said any more, so I know there's short time.
Se vocês não usassem a palavra somática para falar do trabalho de vocês, que outras palavras vocês usariam?
Yeah, I heard that. Yeah. Good question.
I actually try not to use any words. Ah, meu Deus do céu, desculpa. Na verdade, eu tento não usar nenhuma palavra que defina o meu trabalho. O mais próximo que eu uso é que eu trabalho com teatro coreográfico e instalações site-specific, interactive, né? Muita coisa interativa, corpo coletivo. Eu tento não definir uma área. Por isso que hoje eu falei no Bartenieff Fundamentals. O meu trabalho não é exatamente esse, e eu acho que faz parte da área somática, mas ser somático, eu já não sei nem bem o que é. Porque é justamente onde eu não quero estar no ser. Está se tornando... Esses últimos, quando eu estava pensando para cá, se tornou muito somático. Nessa preparação para vir e apresentar a Barternieff. Aí eu falei, nossa, como eu tenho trabalhado. Foi quase que uma... Sabe, eu percebi o quanto que eu venho trabalhando dessa maneira, sem nunca nominar dessa maneira, sempre vendo que o trabalho da Barternieff é um trabalho somático, mas o meu é um trabalho artístico, que contém, tem a área somática dentro dele. Né? Sei lá, alguma coisa por aí.
I think that I wouldn't use another word because it took me a long time to get there, and I was very happy when I found the word. You know, in Ireland, really, when I started doing my PhD, like people weren't talking about somatics at all. I was in a theatre department, you know, where they looked at literature. It was seen as very strange, and Joan Davis, the choreographer who I studied, yes, she was using all sorts of language to try and explain what she was doing. So then when I started doing the research and found there were groups of movement practices together, and they were called somatics, and there was a whole field discussing this, I was like really excited to be part of a community. So yeah, somehow it feels important to me. But I understand, and the question is, you know, could you replace that word with something else? For me, it feels important to hold on to that word and actually argue for what somatic practices are offering, rather than trying to merge them with something else.
Yeah, thank you very much for both of your presentations, which I enjoyed very, very much. I would like to actually ask a question to both of you, because I found, well, it's not a concept, but maybe rather an idea, the idea of listening, pretty important, obviously. So listening, so not like doing, but rather listening in terms of like you, Emma, going in Coventry to the refugee center and sort of maybe also trying to figure out, okay, what is it the people want to do, or what are their stories? And you doing the project with the invisibly living people in Rio, or also the people in Copacabana, sort of trying to let them voice where they find themselves, in which position they find themselves. So are there certain, I wouldn't say techniques, but maybe practices coming from the somatics that you use in order to facilitate this idea of listening?
I have to think now to answer that question. Thank you, Susanna. What do I do? I really need to. I mean, I suppose, like, just thinking off the top of my head, you know, what I always start with is the interoception. So, you know, the tuning into listening to my own body systems, because I suppose before I met somatics, I would have been very much out in the world, responding and reacting, before I was aware of, you know, what signs and signals were already there giving me information. So that's sort of, for me, the first step of listening. And then, of course, another one which I'm sort of really just trying to explore and understand better is the level of boundary. So, you know, we're often talking about, you know, there's no, you know, where the relationship between the inner and outer is fluid, and it is, but there are actually boundaries in the body. So I've been exploring, you know, whether it's at the cell level or the body skin level, or, you know, all the different levels at which we have boundaries before we interact, and then the interaction with the environment, so basing myself in a space, getting to know it, being with people. So it's receptive and active. It's like what you're describing as well. It's an active listening, I suppose, as well. So it's being together. So I don't know if that's very clear, but anyway, I can think further and talk to you more.
With both of you, listening to both of you, it reminded me of a word.
If you want.
Eu acabei de chegar ao Brasil de volta, eu quero falar em português.
Mas me lembrou de uma palavra que um somatic practitioner, como é que se fala aqui? Praticante somático? Ok. Ele falou que é somaction. Então, é essa ideia de que existe, ao mesmo tempo, um ouvir e um receber. Acontece não, para mim, né? Não tem um momento que eu ouço e depois um momento que eu ajo. Eu acho que isso tem muito a ver realmente com a Barternieff e com o conceito de interno e externo, dessa que a Emma acabou de falar também, dessa ligação, né? Mas que, ao mesmo tempo, a gente percebe como fora e como dentro. E também um conceito que eu trabalhei e estou trabalhando cada vez mais, que é ação-recuperação. Sem que recuperação seja a inação ou um outro lado, ou seja, ouvir ou fazer. De que maneira que você pode encontrar no fazer o ouvir? E de que maneira você, ao estar ouvindo, você pode estar fazendo? Esse conceito ele foi muito importante na minha vida para eu fazer muitas coisas. E como eu tenho uma energia enorme, a parte de recuperação ficou pequena. Mas eu tenho, agora com mais idade, o meu corpo fala, e eu estou adorando essa fala nova dele. Eu estou me sentindo diante de algo muito novo para mim, que é necessitar de recuperação. Porque, na verdade, acontecia quase que obrigatoriamente. Mas agora existe maior espaço. E eu queria usar o que a Emma falou também, porque você também citou o trabalho de Copacabana, e também o trabalho da casa de cômodos, é que existem barreiras geográficas. Existem isso, para mim, que bom que você viu. Isso, para mim, é muito importante. Muito importante. Até o fato de eu viver 20 anos em 2 países diferentes, com a casa nos 2, então, e com 2 culturas muito diversas, então, esse embate sempre foi muito forte. E é muito forte para mim ver se é possível, sem assimilação, cruzar a barreira, ir ao outro lado, ir para a casa de cômodos, ser aceita na casa de cômodos, receber, como a Emma estava falando do host, eu achei tão bonito que você falou sobre isso, como receber, como conversar com o guarda, que, em princípio, eu acho que ele está lá para uma coisa que eu não gosto muito. Nem que seja para me proteger. Também já não gosto tanto assim. Então, como é que a gente consegue se aproximar? Então, essas barreiras com as... eu vou terminar nisso, com as mulheres sem casa de São Francisco. Elas moram principalmente num bairro chamado Tenderloin. Grudado no Tenderloin, grudado, tem a área de hotéis mais chique. É uma esquina que ninguém ultrapassa. Acho essas coisas me arrepiam, sabe? Esses mapas invisíveis que te mantêm, sabe? E que a gente tem aqui na cidade também, de outras maneiras, onde nós achamos que temos poder para ir e sermos aceitos, quem nós podemos receber e realmente aceitar. Que pensamento totalmente diverso do meu eu posso ouvir com respeito e realmente ouvir. Esse é um exercício que eu acho bem importante, ouvir e ouvir com respeito, mesmo que eu discorde completamente. E aí ter coragem de expor o meu. Porque é difícil a beça, mas é um exercício muito importante, eu acho que para o Brasil nesse momento.
I thought of something else, just very brief to answer Susanna. So just something that I remembered there that came up when I was doing the cook-along interviews. The first time I went in, I had very clear intentions of questions I wanted. So I was taking in lots of information, but I was very focused on getting through these questions. And then I realized that I lost things through maybe not attending to what was going on and responding. So to alter that, I was reading Tim Ingold's work, I think, which was looking at attention, so a more dispersed focus. So while I had this preparation of things I was curious about, there was also how do I disperse my attention to attend to everything that's happening in the environment and being part of it and belonging to it, and the questions sort of emerging from that too. So that was just something I wanted to mention.
Yeah.
Ok. Muito obrigada pelas vossas intervenções, adorei ouvir-vos. Eu tinha uma pergunta para a Emma e depois outra pergunta para a Regina, não sei se... Emma, tu falaste que nas tuas práticas somáticas, na tua investigação somática, as tuas intervenções não eram tão focadas em intervenções diretamente relacionadas com o corpo. Escolheste contar as histórias, escolheste a relação através do cozinhar. E a minha pergunta é, quais foram essas dificuldades que encontraste em relacionar diretamente com o corpo e porquê essa tua escolha de investigar a somática através de outros médiums? Para a Regina, não sei se será bem uma pergunta, eu achei muito interessante falares de níveis físicos e níveis sociais, e na tua intervenção não haver uma hierarquia, na tua noção de níveis, especialmente quando se vai a níveis sociais, não ter um preconceito de que níveis se refere a hierarquias. Não sei se depois queres também comentar um pouco essa tua visão.
Talvez seja no bar, depois daqui, né? Porque eu acho que não vai dar tempo para ser aqui. Mas eu adoraria responder sobre isso. Não sei se vai ser possível aqui.
Boa tarde a todos. Muito obrigado pela linda palestra que vocês duas deram. Uma curiosidade, eu vou perguntar para a Regina. Regina, a Barternieff foi muito importante no meu processo, principalmente quando eu descobri Chorometrics, que ela trabalhou com Alain Lomax. E, para mim, me ajudou muito, porque eu tinha que provar para a minha professora, Márcia Siegel, que o samba era de origem africana e que Carmen Miranda dançava o samba de uma maneira afro-brasileira. Então, foi muito interessante entender a questão das diferenças culturais e como é que essas diferenças culturais apareciam nos movimentos, nos estilos do movimento, na utilização dos níveis, na utilização do torso, etc., etc., etc. Foi, assim, realmente uma grande descoberta. E eu fiquei curioso para saber, porque a maneira como você apresentou a Barternieff, o elemento cultural ele está implícito, mas ele não está explícito assim.
É que eu deixei para ela.
Ah, tá.
Na verdade, essa é a minha maior fala. O que eu mais falo é sobre isso. Mas eu já estava com esse tema, então eu resolvi não...
Então, mas a minha questão era mais assim, porque eu fiquei realmente apaixonado pelo Chorometrics e até hoje eu uso. E a própria Márcia Siegel, na época, ela era um pouco reticente em relação à utilização e tal, que achava um pouco ortodoxo a forma de utilizar. Isso foi há 20 anos atrás, que eu tive o contato com ela. Eu queria saber hoje se isso ainda tem uma validade para vocês ou para o método, enfim.
I was reflecting earlier on the walking event that happened earlier. What would happen if that was happening in Ireland? And I don't know how people would engage with that. So I didn't have really time to go into the history, but you know, so Ireland tried to create itself as a nation distinct from the colonizer in terms of religion. So decided it was a certain kind of Catholicism, and it was anti the savage representation it had by the colonizer in the English stages. And so even traditional Irish dancing, the arms came tied to the body, and then we also became much more famous for literature and storytelling, music. So dance was much later developing, like in terms of contemporary dance and so on. And so I do feel it's harder to approach that community if I said, okay, we're going to do some dance. I think it would be quite challenging. But I didn't try that, so, you know, I'd have to test that theory. But it was using the body because we were in people's kitchens, moving around them with them, tasting, smelling, touching. So it was just another way in to use the body. So that was my perception of what might work. Yeah.
Se você me permitir, eu vou responder a sua depois. E eu vou dizer por quê. Porque eu já ia falar para a Emma que ela precisa conhecer o Choreometrics. Então, você trazer esse... Você conhece o Choreometrics? Provavelmente ninguém conhece, né? Pois é. Por isso é que eu acho que seria interessante deixar essa pitadinha aqui com vocês. Esse é um projeto que está na base do trabalho da Barternieff. É um trabalho com antropologia e estudos culturais, que ela fez, quem foi na conferência viu isso, que ela fez junto com Alan Lomax, que é um antropólogo, nós estamos falando de anos 60, e Faustine Paulet, que acabou de estar com a gente, maravilhosa, na conferência dos 40 anos do Laban Institute. Econometrics olhou para... você talvez possa me corrigir no número de danças, mas eu acho que 164 danças, né?
Do mundo todo.
Do mundo inteiro, fazendo a relação com a cultura de cada um dos lugares e o que poderia também ser comum e atravessar diversas culturas. Esse trabalho, na época, foi apresentado por esse antropólogo, que foi escorraçado, porque o trabalho era qualitativo, e isso, na época, não era algo muito bem-vindo, tinha que ser quantitativo, e o tempo passa. E, atualmente, o Choreometrics está fortíssimo, porque o qualitativo volta. Então, está acontecendo de uma maneira muito bonita e sendo estendido, inclusive, para as chamadas danças informais, ou seja, que no caso eram mais as danças étnicas, mas atualmente para as danças que dançamos todos os dias, né? E o que vai se tornar um projeto para sempre, né? É bom saber que isso foi importante para você. A Faustine Paulet, inclusive, teve uma fala muito poderosa, e com a qual eu concordei publicamente, de que havia maior necessidade de contextualizar o trabalho labaniano e que o Choreometrics era uma via bastante importante. Acho que o trabalho se distanciou um pouco do vínculo cultural, e eu acho que é muito bem-vindo. E eu posso te dar todos os endereços e telefones e tudo, para você continuar.
Maravilha, muito obrigado.
E é um trabalho, se vocês colocarem Choreometrics, C-H-O, Choreometrics. Na internet já tem bastante coisa. Tem um site pela filha do Alan Lomax, Ana Lomax. Então, é uma coisa que vale a pena como uma futura pesquisa.
Gente, muito obrigada, Regina, Emma. Foram falas riquíssimas. E obrigada a todos. A gente agora finaliza para as performances que vão acontecer lá fora. Obrigada.